Welcome to Blueprints for Brilliance Coaching Insights, a podcast by coaches for coaches. Our guests share their hard-won wisdom to help you grow your coaching business and create a life of success. So get ready to unlock the blueprints to your success. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode. I'm thrilled that you're here, and I'm also thrilled to have Dr. Brian Tierney. He likes to be called Dr. B. He is a somatic doctor and a somatic coach, so I'm excited to learn more about that and about how he helps his clients. So welcome to the show, Dr. B.
Thanks, Jeannie. Good to see you.
Always good to see you. So tell us a little bit about what is a somatic doctor or a somatic coach?
Yeah, somatic just means body. So I'm a body-mind specialist, So we have in the West, we have this way of separating the body and the mind. And a somatic coach or somatic psychologist is all about helping people to reconnect the body and the mind. For example, if you have really bad posture and you're slouched all the time, it's harder to be confident. And I'm being literal here. I'm not being metaphoric.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you end up becoming a somatic doctor or coach?
So when I was doing my bachelor's, I started to get a lot of anxiety, and that anxiety showed up as a somatic symptom in my throat. And it felt like I needed to cough up a fur ball or something like that. It wasn't until I met some somatic folks and did some body work and did some healing that I understood that was a lot of repressed grief that was stuck there in my throat, which is often the case for us men, being enculturated into if you cry or whatever, that makes you a wimp. So I needed to cough up the fur ball, and the fur ball was basically like a lot of repressed grief from growing up and where I grew up here in Minnesota. I'm here in the woods. It's a bit cold, but one of the things with the kind of northern states and the kind of Midwest states, everybody's repressed in different ways, but there's unique ways of getting repressed here. So it's like a deep freeze to the emotions, and you need to thaw them out over time. And so again, freeze, it's not a metaphor. It gets frozen in the tissue of the body. Like that cry, the urge to cry gets swallowed and bitten down. And we're talking about the neuromusculature of the larynx and the jaw. We're not talking metaphor here.
Tell us a little bit about how did you know that was there? You obviously were having the anxiety and then you went to a coach, and then did they say, hey, you got trouble with your throat?
No, I had to piece it together on my own. These days, somatics is out there in the world, and if you search for it, you might run into some more clinical language like somatic symptom disorder or functional neurological disorder. And so if you did internet searches for like weird somatic symptoms and you've gone to a medical doctor and the medical doctor is, oh, okay, we've run our diagnostics, you seem to be okay, but then meanwhile, you're feeling this symptom, that's when you go to see a somatic psychologist, because we're pros at being able to translate and to dig into what is the symptom, what are the psychological elements or what's repressed, and how is stress being held in the body in patterned ways. So for me, it was just like I needed to piece it together for myself and go from practitioner to practitioner. And when I started to realize that it was doing some men's work and meeting some guys that weren't so repressed and guys that had access to their grief and so on. And in short, being able to cry myself, that the symptoms started to go away. And then I started to meet somatic psychologists after that. And I was like, I want to be one of those.
I love that.
Yeah.
How do you unravel that for your clients to help them better understand what they're suppressing?
Somatic work often dovetails quite a bit with trauma resolution work, because trauma is housed in the body as well as not just in the brain or even in the brain's predictive processes, which it very much is, because the brain is a predictive organ and it's always predicting and projecting futures and predicting and projecting defenses that have been informed by a traumatic past. So let's say I'm in a car accident, my body goes into a fetal position as the body does in defense. If that trauma isn't cleared, then the body and brain will continue to predict and project circumstances where we have to get into the fetal position. And if you imagine that over decades, of course, what's going to happen? Our posture is going to be affected. We're going to be constantly protected and stuff like that. And you don't want that. You don't want that for your immune system. You don't want that for your psyche. and it becomes structuralized in the body. So all that to say is that there's a lot of overlap with trauma resolution work. So I'm doing a lot of trauma processing in my practice. In fact, that's why most people come to me, because I'm a neuroscience professor as well. So I know the neuroscience of this stuff. I teach people the neuroscience of this stuff and basically help people to retrain their nervous systems through trauma resolution work. So what does that look like? It looks like often regressing to the traumatic memory. And then based on my knowledge of neuroscience, I'm helping the body to, and it's like a technical language, but we'll unpack it and hopefully it'll be clear, release the thwarted impulse that is there lodged in the nervous system. So when I say thwarted impulse, what I mean is that I'll give you an example. I was working with somebody that fell asleep at the wheel going 75. And this was in the mountain, okay? So they fell asleep at the wheel, they're going 75, and the car flipped over and got lodged in between a rock and a hard place, literally upside down. So the guy was hanging from a seatbelt and he was just stuck there. He couldn't move. In fact, he passed out. He woke up. Long story short, when he came to, there was cops at the jaws of life getting him out, and he was all woozy because he had hit his head. And then there was this big scene that was around him, as you would expect, right? This is a major accident. There's a big scene. There's a voice. He comes to, he's unconscious, and it's scary. And everybody's yelling and running around, and nobody's there with a quiet, calm voice to say, "Are you okay? Hey, let's talk. Hey, I get that you're afraid," and things like that. The nervous system is trying to do a lot. It's trying to orient to safety. And he didn't have that because he didn't have a clear, calm voice that's there. And there's various impulses in the nervous system that are trying to achieve safety. For him, as we got into that regression, the impulse was to actually run away from these people. Because even though they were trying to help, they were so overwhelming to him that they weren't providing that orienting response that his nervous system needed. So, what the thwarted impulse for him, actually, believe it or not, was to run away from these people, go off into the forest or something like that so he could put himself together. So that impulse, that thwarted impulse to run away, was lodged in his nervous system, and it was stuck together with the emotional material, which was, and he was a guy, of course, so a lot of times it's to cry. Guys need to cry. When his legs came back online, it was like, okay, the impulse to run. Let's imagine yourself running. Go ahead and run. Feel yourself running. Go ahead and run. And then that's all the brain needs to release the thwarted impulse. And then what happens once we run to safety, the tears come out and then he's crying. And then the trauma starts to resolve from there because we're releasing these impulses that the nervous system couldn't release at the time. And they're primal natural impulses that we've essentially been enculturated out of.
That's fascinating. So was he like in situations where when he got uncomfortable, did he like physically leave or mentally leave the situation? Is that how it was affecting
Yeah,
his
for sure.
day-to-day?
Yeah. And the dissociation response, that's the fancy word. And that's often, if trauma is unresolved, that's often going to be the case. When things get intense in life, like when we're in conflict or something and stress goes high, if the trauma is unresolved, what will happen is that person will go into dissociation. And in this guy's case, it would be his legs. So he can't feel his legs. So he's going to be bumping around into tables more often and just getting a bit spacey or out there, especially when things get intense. So we could imagine him being in a conflict or something like that, or being high stress. And then what happens is he starts to bump into tables more with his knees because his legs have shut off, because the thwarted impulse is there in the legs, and the legs just go offline because it's like the body has a primitive memory of that moment and goes back in time to that moment where his nervous system does not know how to orient. And it's like kind of a boutique term or a niche term in somatics is like a held charge. And that's the language of the nervous system, anyways, right? Charge and discharge. And that goes across scales from the single neuron level all the way up to the entire organism, right? So a held charge in the tissue, in the neuromuscular junctions and neuromuscular dynamics that are just held there and can't fire. But after the release of the thwarted impulse, then the legs are less apt to dissociate. The person is less likely to become spaced out.
That's amazing. Like he must have been so relieved because he was probably terrified. Did he understand that his
Yes.
body was reacting to the trauma he had, or was he just thinking, I've got something wrong with my head or something's not connecting?
Yeah, we're not trained to think like this. We're trained to think in specialist terminology. So for him, actually, the presenting condition was his guts, actually, his abdomen. He was having really bad digestive distress. But his parents were researchers and they knew that something had changed after the accident. So they found somatics. But who's out there going to be thinking naturally, especially if you go to a specialist, a physician that is, of course, they're going to run their digestive system diagnostics and they're not going to be thinking, even though honestly, when I go in to see physicians and they ask me what I do and I tell them what I do, they say I could send you 60% of my clients or 60% of my patients because they know they have a natural intuition about the body mind connection. So he himself wouldn't have made that connection, but his parents as researchers did make that connection. And then his digestive stuff, it did clear up.
Oh, he must be so grateful for open-minded parents who do research.
For sure.
So tell me a little bit about how people who are listening and thinking this might be something that's affecting me, what kind of signs? I know it probably manifests itself in different ways for different people, but are there similar things that people will feel when they should talk to someone like you?
Yeah, often your partners and people that are close to you a little bit more than you, because we all have blind spots. The brain has blind spots. So I would say that if you have somatic symptoms that the medical profession and physicians aren't helping you with, kind of ask your partners and your family members, hey, what do you think my blind spots are? That's a courageous question, right? What do you think my blind spots are? And just prepare to receive the response in an undefended manner and just take in the information. You know what I mean? So you get curious, and that might take you some time because it can be hard to be vulnerable with the people that we're closest with. And then just ask for that information. You might find some really interesting stuff out if you ask that question.
Yeah, so it's more talking to someone about how your blind spots, as in, what are you not paying attention to? What are you trying to push aside when you should be moving forward? So it's less physical per se than mental. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, it certainly puts us on the bridge between the body and the mind. Another way of saying it, and maybe even more courageous, is where do you feel like your blind spots almost inevitably lead us to defense strategies and defense patterns? And what I'm saying here is that those defense patterns are literally in the body. They're in the armatures of the body and the defense patterns, the way that we armor ourselves, and that stuff can be read by a somatic psychologist. Questions like that put us on the bridge to like, how does the body defend itself over time? And of course, we're going to invariably be led to the face and the jaw because there's so much that we hold here in terms of aggression. We want to defend ourselves, but we bite back what we want to say. We want to say, screw you, stop talking to me that way. And that's a defense pattern. But if we're biting it back and biting it back and biting it back, then it gets held in the jaw. Then, for example, a person will have bruxism and they'll be grinding their teeth all night long. But really, it's just charged up aggression that wants to find its way out.
I have that. I think I've flattened all my teeth out. I guess I've been grinding them at night.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the sort of thing that we want to address, right? We want to get a person out in a private location in nature, and we want to get them to creatively express aggression so that they're not grinding down their teeth or they're not, blowing up in conflict. And then, like a whack-a-mole or something like that, the aggression that just goes down into the subconscious after that and then pops up and then back down.
Okay. So you gave us a little bit of insight. So how do you work with your clients? Do you try and upset them to get them to react?
Sure. Yeah. In short, yes, but in a kind of, I want to upset people in a clinically appropriate way. So we don't want to go too fast. Another way of saying that is reflect their consciousness towards where they're already upset. You know what I mean? So they're already upset. That would be the assumption. And I'm just a companion to help them to have a language for it and give them some structure then So yeah, if you want to discharge a kind of hidden held charge in the nervous system, then you got to aggravate it a little bit. And you even see that in marketing now, right? There's actually an old relationship between marketing and psychology, and you got to agitate the problem. You know that one? You
Absolutely.
got to
Without a doubt.
agitate the problem. And if you don't agitate the problem, you're not in the right system.
Yeah. And you can't motivate people to take action because they're not in enough pain.
Right.
Sad, but true. So do you only work in person with people or do you do like online coaching or consulting?
I do online coaching worldwide, right? Because in California, like if I'm doing somatic psychotherapy, which is usually longer, more sustained work, psychotherapeutic work, it's the longer trajectory there. Coaching is just a different style, it's a different skill set, and I offer that worldwide online.
Okay. Is there a certain amount of time that people work with you typically, or does it depend on what they're struggling with and how deep that is?
Yeah, like in a world of efficiency, everybody wants 5 steps to enlightenment by next week or something like that. I think it's hullabaloo. That's hullabaloo. Real healing takes time, but there are some efficiencies in the work. Like, for example, phobias and stuff like that. I can sometimes clear a phobia in one session, like an elevator phobia or vomiting phobia and stuff like that. Those are the ones that are a little bit more efficient, but for kind of complex trauma, I need 3 to 5 sessions to really figure out what's going on here. Usually we'll be seeing results for sure by session number 3, but to have a thoroughgoing assessment, I need 3 to 5. A lot of folks, if they do 8 sessions, they're going to see some significant progress.
Yeah, I can equate that to you said there isn't a 5 step to enlightenment. There's no 5 steps to making millions of dollars either by tomorrow.
For sure.
Back to marketing again. This is amazing. And I am so grateful for people like you who are helping people who really need it and maybe don't even know that they need it or they're suffering in ways they don't need to be suffering. I know there's people listening who are saying, I love Dr. B. I love what he's saying. I think maybe the doctors I've been going to see are not helping me and I'm still struggling with something. What is the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, so my brand is Somatic Doctor, Somatic, doctor spelled out. Somaticdoctor.com is the website. Somatic Doctor is on also Instagram. And I also have a podcast called The Boundless Body, which is fun for those of you that are philosophically inclined to nerd out about the body. And I'm a neuroscience professor. So on the horizon too, I do have my book coming out next year. It's a labor of love. It took me about 4 years to write. And you can sign up for my newsletter. Just go to somaticdoctor.com and you can sign up for the newsletter. It's all self-explanatory and be in the pipeline to get updates and so on.
Do you want to share the name of the book or do you not have that yet?
Visionary Somatics.
And what's that book going to be?
It's an update to the trauma neuroscience, and it's for folks that are trauma resolution specialists out there that want to upskill and get an actual update to the trauma literature, which is actually quite old. So it's like a how-to book for clinicians, but it's also a deep dive into philosophy, sociology. It really is a challenging book. It was meant to be written as a challenging book and not a 5 steps to whatever. It's not meant to be easy, and I'm not going to apologize about that. It's meant to challenge brains. It's meant to challenge, and which is good for brains. Brains need to be challenged. And it's also a how-to book. It's something else. I'm quite proud of it. It's pretty badass.
I love that. When it comes out next year, if you send us a link to it, we'll include it in the show notes. But for now, we'll include for sure a link to your website so people can sign up for your newsletter. So I'm sure you'll be announcing it in there as well. So last question I have for you is what I ask my guests. If you could provide one tip to make the world a better place, what would that be?
Okay, actively practice spontaneity. Go out and play more. Actively practice spontaneity. That being distinct from impulsiveness. Impulsiveness is you're impulsively dancing across the street, not looking both ways. Spontaneously, you're actually dancing across the street while maintaining safety.
I love that. I love that. And I'm totally on board with we don't have enough fun. And I think we should be having a little bit more fun and being a little more playful and thinking back of what you enjoyed when you were younger and maybe even trying those again. Dr. B, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing so much about somatics, educating us on what it is and how you and people like you can help
other people out in the world. So thank you for being my guest today.
Thanks, Jeannie. It was an honor. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on Blueprints for Brilliance Coaching Insights. We hope you're leaving this episode with inspiration to take your coaching business and your life to the next level. If you found value in this episode, we would love it if you would subscribe and share it with someone else who you think might benefit from hearing it. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next episode.